Welcome to John Gets Games. This is my April/May variety vlog. Normally I do one of these every month to cover the stuff that I've played over that month and various exciting things that have come up, but work got so busy for me that it's been 2 months since I've done this. And because of that, I'm going to focus this episode more on the games that I've been playing over these last 2 months as I've squeezed them in amongst my hectic work schedule, and not so much covering future games that I'm excited about. As you can see over there, there are a bunch of games that I am going to cover, so feel free to jump ahead to the ones that you're specifically interested in, or just stick around for the whole thing. As far as general updates are concerned, as I just mentioned, the last couple months have been dominated by work. In the event production industry, which is what I do for a living, the months of April and May are usually pretty busy, but this year, the San Francisco Modern Art Museum reopened after many years of being closed for renovation, and I was the lead on a month-long stretch of like 9 different opening shows. So I was at that museum a bunch. It was pretty exciting and cool. Some big stuff was happening, but it was hard to squeeze in time for playing games as well as time to record videos. It's been actually a month pretty much to the day since I recorded anything. Fortunately, before this crazy blitz, I recorded like 7 or 8 videos worth of stuff, and I've been trickling them out over the week, so it doesn't seem like there's been a big gap in the amount of time I've had to put towards these videos. So fortunately, things are slowing down a little bit, and I hope to get some more videos out at a slightly more regular rate going forward, specifically playthrough videos, which take a long time to record. Those have been put on the back burner, and I have lots of games I want to cover. Fortunately, I was able to block off the weekend of Memorial Day, which was a week or 2 ago. I took 4 days off and I went up to a rented cabin in Tahoe with 6 of my friends, and we just had a great time playing tons of board games. That was really the idea. It was just to have a mini convention kind of feel with some of my great friends and just play as many games as we could, and we drank a bunch of beer and wine, stayed up late at night, and were in our pajamas into the mid-afternoon. It was a really great time. We played 27 games total. I played 19 of those, and I won 50%, which I am kind of amazed by. Honestly, I don't win games that often, so I was on a roll this weekend, although a couple of those were co-ops, and one of them was Pictionary, so I don't know how much I want to count that because we rolled a lot of 6s, but either way, it was a really good time, and many of the games I'm going to talk about later on in this vlog were played at that specific weekend because that was the best time I've had over the last couple of months, really, to play a bunch of these games. So now it's time for me to answer some questions that were sent over to me over the last couple months, and the first of these was sent by Colt Caverly. He asked, what is an unusual or rarely used theme that you would like used in a board game? And I thought about this one a bunch, and it's kind of hard because in this day and age, there are board games being made about everything, all sorts of things, from the really niche to the really broad, like, Vikings are happening quite a bit these days. The one that stuck out to me that I thought I'd love to see more of would be games specifically about the processes of organisms. Like, take the human body. If there was a game about the actual, digestive tract, or like moving bits of food down and turning them into energy, and I'm not sure how the competition would be. Maybe like a crazy cooperative game where you're just trying to keep the body healthy so it doesn't get sick, like keep all the stuff flowing around, and maybe somebody's in charge of the circulatory system and somebody's in charge of the digestive system. I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but that does sound like kind of a weird, interesting game. But I guess just in general, games that show the mechanical processes that happen through life, I think you could see some pretty interesting engine building games there, because really what we have going on here is an insanely complex engine that's doing some pretty miraculous things, and I love engine building in games in general, so there you go. I think a theme based off of organisms and how they all function would be pretty cool to see. The next question comes from Zone Gamma, and they asked, I would like to ask you if you ever have problems with storing your games vertically on your shelves. Any board warping, and do you have any tips to give? And I would say that, well, I do really like storing my games like this. When I first started storing my games on the shelf, actually, I've owned this shelf since before I even got into board games. It was originally just for all my books about 8 or 9 years ago, but as I've gotten board games, they've slowly taken over this entire shelf. And originally I had them going flat, just stacking up on the shelves, but I realized that when I put them like this, I just think it looks better. It's easier to grab. You don't have to like take one out and have them all fall back down, and you don't have to be worried about the weight of games kind of crushing other games. Now, it is true that many of the games, when you pull them out and you open them up, they're just kind of a mess inside because they are on their side, and so stuff's all going to slide down, and some inserts are better than others, and honestly, you usually get away with this by just putting everything into sandwich bags, and then it's all fine. Doesn't matter how much of a mess you have inside there. One thing specifically that many people have noticed is that I store my games with the words going up, and this is a weird quirk of my brain. I don't really understand why, but when I look at the shelf, this just looks better to me. And I know that it's the opposite of like most bookshelves, and I don't really understand why. And it causes some games to look a little silly, like the Cosmos games. The Cosmos is actually upside down and up on the top, but hey, for some reason, I like the way this looks better, and hopefully it doesn't drive too many people crazy when they're watching these vlogs and seeing all these games, kind of reading the wrong way behind me. And lastly, with regards to giving tips, the one thing that I've really liked about my specific bookshelf situation is that I've tried to organize them with given sizes. Like I kind of modified the tops up here so I had a section for all these tiny games because I found that it was really hard to exhibit tiny games. You can kind of put them in a pile and you forget you own many of them. They just get lost in the shuffle. And some of these games up at the top are really great. You don't want to forget that you own them, but they get a bit dwarfed by the larger games that hang out down here. So that would probably be my tip. The other thing that I do is I sort my games from the lighter spectrum to the heavier spectrum. Also, as far as how much I like them, the higher it is on the shelf, more likely the more I like it. But that gets broken down when you have specific shelves up at the top that only take specific sizes of games. But it's kind of fun to be able to look at a shelf and just have an idea of what you're looking at. Like, this is a game that John really likes, and it's on the heavier side because it's in that one specific section of the shelf. And I think at some point I might rejigger things around. I mean, right here I kind of have the 2-player only section, so it's not a general rule for the entire shelf, but it's fun to have something that you're going to organize your shelf by. That way you can know where to grab a game when you need to, especially once you have a collection that balloons over 100 games. You want to be able to find them quickly. The last question comes from Francis Wee, and he asked, if you only have money for one game, Black Fleet or Jamaica, which one would it be? And this is an interesting question to answer because these are both pirate-themed games where you have ships out on an ocean doing various things. In Jamaica, it is a race around the island of Jamaica. It is a fully simultaneous action game where you are kind of getting loot and plundering your opponents to a certain degree and rolling some dice and getting some pretty cool abilities. Whereas Black Fleet is a game where it has a strong pick up and deliver mechanism, but you are also kind of building an engine with some special powers on your ship, and you're sailing around trying to sink each other. I think that all things being equal, I think Black Fleet is a better game, but Black Fleet only plays up to 4. So at the end of the day, I would say if you find yourself oftentimes playing games with 5 or 6 players, Jamaica is going to be the better buy for you because it does play that player count really well because it's mostly simultaneous and it has some really great decisions in there. But if you are playing games more 4 players and you are looking for a slightly more Euro-y experience where you're trying to get things low and get lots of money for them, kind of skirt around, the Black Fleet is much more about board positioning. I mean, Jamaica is literally just a track. You go forward or you go backwards, but on Black Fleet you're going in all sorts of different directions trying to hide behind islands so that other people's pirates can't sink you. They're both really good games, but ultimately it kind of depends on what your group is looking for. A slightly deeper experience would be Black Fleet, although it's really not a deep game at all. And like I said, if you have big groups, I think Jamaica is probably the better call. If you have any questions you'd like me to answer on a future vlog, please email them over to me at JonGetsGames@gmail.com, and I look forward to answering them here next time. Alright, now it's time to talk about games of note, and these are 12 different games that I've played over the last 2 months, and this isn't even all of them. I've been fortunate enough to cram in a surprising number of games despite my heavy work schedule, but these are the ones I want to talk about the most, and all of these were new to me over the last couple months. There have been a couple plays of other games that have been really great, like Pandemic Legacy and Firenze, but I'm not really going to go into those because I've talked to them multiple times on this channel in the past. So let's go ahead and start. And the first game that I want to cover is Steam Time, or Steam O-Time, as it kind of looks like on the box. And this is a really great worker placement game that came out of the blue for me. I hadn't heard about it until about a month ago or so when I saw the Rado Runs Through video, and I just thought, whoa, that looks really great. The key mechanics here, I mean, it is a worker placement game. You have 3 workers, but a big thing about it is there are these 6 different crystals that you are going to be acquiring as you are playing the game, and you put them onto this Zeppelin that you have in front of you. The theme is that you are time-traveling Zeppelins in like 100 years ago, trying to see crazy sights and get the esteem of Mr. Time. I think it's a very goofy theme, and it's a beautiful looking game. But what you're really doing is getting these crystals, installing them into your Zeppelin, and what it means is whenever you do one of the 6 main actions in the game, you get bonus actions based on the number of crystals that are installed on that action's spot. So maybe when you go to get more crystals, then as a bonus action you get some wild colored crystals that you can put anywhere. or when you go to get some money, you get a bunch more money. And it was a really great thing going there. Like, first of all, you're like, oh, that's a neat engine. You get stuff and you upgrade these actions. But then the key is that you need to spend those crystals in order to get permanent upgrades to your ship and to go on specific, very victory point and money lucrative expeditions to see the pyramids and Stonehenge and all that kind of stuff. So at the end of the day, you are just getting stuff and turning into points, but it's a beautiful package, and I'm probably going to be doing a full review of this somewhat soon as I have the time to. I've played it 2, 3, and 4 players over the last 4 months, and the 4-player game was at this Tahoe Cabin gaming thing, and it was just a great time every time I played it, so I'm looking forward to playing that one even more, even though I've already gotten 3 plays in. The next game is Dynasties, which I've got right behind me, and this game is not currently available in English. This is the German version that I bought on Amazon.de and had sent over. Because all the cards in the board and everything inside the box are language independent, I just had to spend a bunch of time and ink printing out my own version of the rules. And the reason I went out of my way to do this is because it has some very cool things going on, and it appeared to be my kind of Euro, and that specifically is mid-range kind of weight, where you do very simple things on your turn that can turn into really great tactics and strategy as you're playing the game. So games like Concordia and Bruges are similar to this one in that on your turn all you do is play a single card, and then it's the next person's turn. There's no like bonus actions, there's no like play 2 cards now or play your whole hand. Nope, you just choose 1 card and you play it. But the other reason I was really attracted to it is because it has the I split you choose mechanism strewn all the way through it. Whenever you have a marriage, somebody rolls 3 dice, and then the other person in that marriage has to split those 3 dice into 2 piles. So they are going to try and balance it to make these 2 piles as even as they can, and then the first person gets to choose one of those piles, and the person who splits gets to take the other one. Also, whenever you're getting resources, which are these awesome little colored bricks that aren't quite cubes, the same thing happens. You have like 5 of these, and one person splits them up, and then the other person chooses one, and the person who splits it gets the resources. It is a really fun game. I played a 4-player game of it at the cabin. It was a little more tactical than I was expecting. You definitely have to be on your toes as you're playing the game, because the main way you get resources is through this I split you choose mechanism, and you can't inherently know what you're going to get in the situation. If you were the person choosing, well, you have a pretty good idea, but you're not sure if you're going to get 2 black and a white or maybe 2 black and a pink. It depends on how the other person splits it. So you have to definitely be on your toes and be able to adapt to the shifting circumstances as you're getting different resources and as these marriages are happening. It definitely has a Euro-y theme where you're just like getting marriages in Europe, and there's a bit of area majority, which is super not new, but I really enjoy the mix of the card play and the I split you choose. I'm looking forward to many more plays of it. It was slightly more weighty than I was expecting. I was thinking it would be more of a Concordia style game, but our 4-player game ended up going over 2 hours, and we all had a good time with it, but it was definitely much more crunchy and thinky than I was expecting. Next up is 51st State, the Master Set Edition. This is a review copy that was sent over by Portal Games, and I've now got in, I think, 4 or 5 games of it, but all at 2 players, and I've really enjoyed it. It is a bit of a spin-off of Imperial Settlers, which was a spin-off of the original 51st State, which is kind of interesting, and they definitely have a similar vibe. If you know Imperial Settlers, it'll be very easy to jump into 51st State, but I really like the additions and changes that they've made to the game, because I had some problems with Imperial Settlers, and it appears that 51st State might answer pretty much all of those, and I'm hoping to do an in-depth review of that one pretty soon. I just need to get a 3-player game of it in before I sit in front of a camera and give you my opinion of it, but I've really been impressed with it. It's a super fun game, and I like the fact that in the box it has 2 different expansions that you can shuffle into the game, one or the other, and I've tried both of them, and they're both enjoyable experiences. I have to admit, I really want to try just mixing all of it together, both expansions and the main deck, just make a huge deck and play through that. I might do that for the 3-player game just to see how the game goes, because it is a little annoying having to separate everything out, and going forward, I just like the variety of cards in this game. I haven't even told you what the game is like. Oh my gosh. This is a tableau building hand management game where you have multi-use cards that can be built in front of you to kind of make an engine where it'll make you resources or maybe spend resources to get you victory points, or you can destroy cards when you take them out of your hand, or maybe even destroy your opponent's buildings that are in a tableau in front of them in order to get resources to turn them into victory points and that kind of thing. So it's been a really fun game. I'm really glad I got the review copy of this, and like I said, I'm looking forward to giving a 3-player game of it a try so that I can get the review done. The next game is World's Fair 1893, which is the newest game by J. Alex Kevern. And this is a neat little game where you have a bunch of simple decisions that have really complex results. What you are doing in this game is just grabbing a pile of cards from 5 different locations that are displayed around a large Ferris wheel in the middle of the table. And that's all you do in your turn, is you just take all the cards from one location and then you put a little influence cube down in that one spot, and there are 5 different spots. After you take those cards, you then put 3 new cards on each spot that is clockwise away from the one that you took. So what that means is this game has an incentivization mechanism, which is one of my favorite in board games. Now, again, this is the idea that the spots that don't get picked get better stuff until somebody ends up taking that spot. And so what you're doing here is a little bit of area control, because that influence disc that or cube that you're putting into that spot is going to score you points based off of how many influence you have in that location when one of the 3 scoring rounds happens as you're playing the game. But you also need to pay attention to the cards that you're grabbing, because these cards will turn into victory points if you're able to turn them into, well, points. The cards themselves are not worth anything. They're kind of like a proposed exhibit at the World's Fair, but if you are the first place person or second place, depending on the player count, in a specific region, you can turn some of these postulated exhibits into actual approved exhibits, and then you get points, and you get really good victory points for having a variety of these 5 different colored card contracts in your area at the end of the game. So you are constantly weighing whether you need to take the cards from a spot because you need to put influence on that location, or if you don't care about the influence but you really need the cards that are there. There are also some famous people cards that give you bonuses, like you can put multiple cubes down or move a cube from one location of the board to another location. So it's a very simple game. You just take all the cards and put a cube down, and then it's the next person's turn. And it has played in about 40 to 45 minutes, the 2 times I've played it now, at 2 players and 4 players so far, and I've enjoyed it so far. It's got some really good stuff going on. In the second game we played, one of the players decided to just always take the most cards, and they just figured most cards is good, and they did very poorly because they were never really in contention for the area majority of the influence in those different spots on the board. So I have been impressed with the game. I'm looking forward to playing it more. It hasn't necessarily blown my socks off. I was quite excited for it, and I've enjoyed it, but I'm definitely looking forward to digging into it a little bit more and seeing what's inside. Now we have the Port Royal expansion, which a rough English translation turns into an order goes or a contract goes, something like that. And what's going on in this game is it just adds in some stuff that you can shuffle into the base game of Port Royal and play it kind of just like you were playing before, but it gets you new people that you can hire that do some pretty cool things, as well as a couple new boats. But then a big thing is these contracts, which give you some incentivization to do different things that you might normally do in Port Royal. So the game of Port Royal is a push your luck game where you're flipping over cards from the top of a stack. You don't want to bust by flipping over 2 of the same ship, and you're trying to get money from the ships and spend that money on people that will give you abilities and gives you lots of victory points, and then you race to be the first person to 12 points. With these contracts, instead of just going for points, this contract might say you need a settler and a captain, and once you do that, you fulfill this contract, you get some money, which is good because it lets you buy things that you need, and as you start to get more of these contracts filled in, you will also get victory points for them. So I like that it's not just a straight victory point grab like it was before. It gives you a little more things to think about. Maybe you will buy that character that you wouldn't normally have because it fulfills this contract over here, and that is going to get you some victory points, and it will veer how you're going to play a little bit differently than it used to. I just really enjoy the new variety to this game that I really liked. The expansion also has a cooperative variant, which I have not tried yet, and I'm very excited to try because I enjoy cooperative games, and I really like Port Royal, and I've never played a push your luck cooperative game before, so looking forward to giving that one a shot, and hopefully I can let you know how that goes in a future vlog. Next up is Animals on Board, which I originally was not that interested in because just looking at the box art, I assumed it would be a kids game, and I don't really have any kids in my family or friend group, but the more I looked into it, the more I realized it looked like a pretty neat I split you choose game, and I know I just talked about that with Dynasties, and this is a much lighter game where all you do on your turn is you either buy a set of animals at 1 food per animal, or you split a group of animals into 2 groups, and then you take a food from the bank. And there are 12 different types of animals in this game, and you are doing essentially set collection, but the twist is that if you end the game with 2 of an animal, you lose it. I guess you're all trying to fill up your arcs, and Noah gets all the pairs of animals, so you want to end the game with 1 or 3 or more animals on your specific arc. And I played it once and had a pretty good time with it. First of all, this game is adorable. I was not expecting that. When we first started playing it, we put all the little animals out in the middle of the table. There was just lots of coos and ahs. We're just like, oh my gosh, look at this one. Oh my gosh, look at this one. Oh, this one looks crazy. Oh, this one's adorable. It seemed like especially the low value tiles are all kind of like baby animals, and man, they are cute. The art in this game is really wonderful, and the actual gameplay mechanism on top of it is so simple. You can teach this game incredibly quickly, and we had a really good time with it. I lost terribly because I decided I wasn't going to go for any sets. I was just going to go for high value animals, and you know what? You got to go for sets in this game. I got beaten by a significant amount of points, which is good. I mean, this game is about making sets, and so it's good that the game will push you to actually doing that and taking risks, because I figured if I never made any sets, I would never worry about ending the game with 2 and losing them. And the animals range in points from 1 to 5, and they're worth that many points if you only have 1. But if you have 3 or more, then every single animal is worth 5 points. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed playing the game. It, much like the last one, did not blow my socks off with excitement. But I am looking forward to getting this one out many more times because it's so easy to teach, and it does have some pretty neat ideas in there. Definitely the lightest I Split You Choose game that I've played in many years. And now we have Sea of Clouds, which is a light card game that has some pretty cool incentivization mechanics built into it. The way the game works is there are 3 face-down cards at the beginning of the game, and the back of every card will tell you what kind of card the front is, whether it's an item or treasure or rum, because this is a pirate game where you're kind of like flying pirates, but not. You are also on the ocean. I don't quite get the thematic tie in there, but the way it works is you get to look privately at the top card, the first of the 3 cards, and you can choose to take it and then put a new card in that spot, and that's your turn. Or you can put that card back if you don't want it, put a new card on top of it, and then grab the next card over and decide if you want that or not. And you can do this up to 3 times. So that means the cards that you're not grabbing are having more cards put on top of them that you don't know about. Like that was a blind card that got put there, so the next opponent's going to look at those 2 cards and maybe they will take it, or maybe they'll leave it and it'll come back to you, and you'll have to decide, do you want to look at it again, because you know that you don't really want one of the cards, but there are new cards on there that you might want. And what you're doing in the game is just trying to win a bunch of pirate battles. You are going to play the game over a set number of turns based on the number of players that are in the game. And after every 3 or 4 turns, I think it is, you will fight everybody who's next to you, just straight adjacency. If it's a 4-player game, you'll never touch the person across the table from you. And you just add up the power of all the pirates you have, and you compare it to your 2 opponents. And if you have more power than them, you will get different bonuses depending on the pirates you have in front of you. But it's not just about that. The game is also about getting a bunch of hidden rum that will get you points at the end of the game through set collection, other objects that have set collection, and some just one-off action cards that let you do some pretty interesting things. It's a fun game. I've played a 3-player game of it so far, and I quite enjoyed it. And it is a beautiful game. I really love the art style of the game. It's very vibrant, although I will admit I don't like the sexualization of all the female characters in the game. It's a good thing that there are female pirates in the game. It's not just dominated by men, but all the women are showing a lot more of their body than all the men are, and I wish that wasn't a thing in the game. Like, I wish it was just a little bit more natural in the appearances of all the players. But it's a bit of a nitpick, but it definitely was a little bit striking when I first started thumbing through all the cards and seeing the differences in this great art in the game, but just a little bit of a thing that jumped out at me. The next game I'd like to talk about was a print and play prototype that I played from Grant Rodiak, and it's currently being called Stumptown. And I just really liked the idea of this game, and he's been posting about it quite a bit on Twitter. He just started developing it a month or so ago. And in this game, you are collectively doing a tile laying, city building type thing in front of you. They're all square tiles, and they're buildings on these tiles or cards that will do various things based off their adjacency. And the twists that this game seems to play in, well, first of all, is that you're all building the same city, but also that the buildings that you build come from a communal row, but they get there through your hand. Like when you build a building, it has to be one that's face up in front of everybody, and you put that out onto the playing area, and you might have a one-shot bonus or an ongoing thing that happens, but you get to put a token down on a new building that you take from your hand and put back into that buying row that will get you victory points when somebody else buys that building. So you're trying to get your opponents to actually do some work for you and get you points as they're trying to build these buildings and put them into the city. But another thing that's going on is many of the buildings can be activated to get various different stuff like points or cards or just all sorts of things. It is a very early prototype of the game. Like I said, it's only been in development for several weeks, but I really enjoyed it. It was fun to play. I like playtests in general, and I'm friends with Grant, so there is a good dialogue going on there. We've been chatting back and forth about many of these mechanisms, and I just enjoy seeing games form, go from an idea to the actual reality. And I don't spend a ton of time doing playtests of games, but it's a thing that is important to me to do a certain amount of the time, because it's just great to delve in and actually have some sort of say in how this game will end up. Now, this game may never even get published. It might turn into something significantly different than everything I've said so far, but I don't know, I wanted to point it out. It was a neat looking game and I enjoyed playing it. Now we have Dice City, which came out late last year, and I've been eyeballing it ever since it came out because it has this crazy idea where you can fully customize these D6s that you're rolling as you're playing the game. I mean, it is called Dice City, and what you're doing on your turn is you roll 5 dice, and they will get to do various things for you, like produce resources, or turn resources into other things, or get you a bunch of resources, or get you attack power to go after some bandits, or even attack the buildings of your opponents. And the way this works, you don't actually modify the die that you have in front of you. You have this huge tableau in front of you that has 5 different rows and 6 different columns, and you take cards from a deck that you can purchase using these resources, and you put them down on these slots on the board to show that when you roll the blue die and it comes out as a 3, well, you just upgraded that spot. So now when you put the die on there, you get 2 metal instead of getting 1 metal like you did before, or maybe now you get 2 victory points instead of that 1 metal you got before. You can put whatever cards you want to down on this tableau that you want, and it's a very neat idea, this extreme amount of customization. You can go very heavy into one strategy, like have half your cards be attack cards, and then pretty much every time you roll your dice, you're gonna have all these attack value cards, and you can go after these bandits. And like I said, you can shut down your opponent's buildings, but you never destroy your opponent's buildings. You just kind of slow their engine down. They have to spend a die in order to reactivate a building that you attacked, and you get points for attacking them. So there's a whole bunch of neat stuff going on here, and I've played it twice, and I felt like there is a lot going on. Like on your turn, you roll the dice and you see what you have in front of you, and not only do you get to evaluate the die rolls that you got, but you can spend dice to move other dice to different locations on your board. So you're not just set with the die roll that you have. It will definitely dictate what your options are, but you usually have a bunch of options with how to evaluate, and you can get many of the different buildings that are on display. So there is quite a bit going on in this game. I'm glad I decided to eventually get it. It was like $23 on Amazon a couple weeks ago, and I just couldn't help myself. I pressed the buy button, even though I've been getting so many games recently, and I'm glad I did. This game, I've had fun playing it. I am a little worried that it might have a fall behind loser issue, but I've not played it enough to really have a strong sense of that at this point, and I do look forward to giving this game several more plays. Next on the list is Onitama, which I was able to play at Victory Point Cafe in Berkeley because I don't actually have a copy, and it was a neat little abstract game. It's a 2-player only game that feels to me like a more interesting version of chess. Now, I don't really mean to kick over a beehive because some people really love chess, and I played it a bunch when I was a kid, but what's going on in this game is it's kind of like a simpler version of chess that has a little bit more variety as far as what you can do, because in every game, there are only 5 different moves that can be done by either player, and you have 2 moves in front of you, and 1 is a communal move. And in front of you on this small board, you have a certain number of small pawns and then 1 big pawn. And all you're trying to do is either capture your opponent's big pawn or get your big pawn into your opponent's goal area. It's on the other side of the board. And the way you do your turns is you just use one of the 2 cards in front of you to move any of your pieces on the board to the specific pattern that that card has in front of it. It might be go forward 1, or go to the right 1, or go back 2, or maybe it's go diagonal to the left 2, or back 1. There's a huge variety in the cards that are in the game. I think it's like 18 or 19 cards. And again, you only use 5 each game. And the key is when you use a card, you then take that neutral communal card and put it in front of you, and you take the card that you used and you put it into the middle. So when your opponent does their turn, they are going to be taking that card from the middle and putting it in front of them. So the card that you play will be an option for your opponent a couple turns down the way, and there is a surprising amount of stuff going on here. I played it 3 times in a row, and this is not my kind of game in general. Like, abstract games are okay, 2-player abstract games, they're okay, but man, sometimes this stuff almost feels too much like hard work. Like, I do like a little bit of randomness in my games because you could really think down hard about what your options are and what your opponent's options are, and if you do this and you put the card out, then they get that card, and what can they do with that card? But it is a pretty simple game, and the amount of forward thinking that you can do is kind of variable to you. You can look at the board state and get a pretty good idea of what your opponent can do to counteract the move that you're about to do. And we played our 3 games in probably about 40 minutes. The first game was super fast, like maybe like 5 or 6 turns, then I screwed up and I lost. The second game was a little bit longer, but then I screwed up and I lost. And the third game went really long, and it felt like, oh man, this is what the game's supposed to be. But by really long, I mean it was probably like 25 minutes or so. And then I lost. So I lost all 3 of the games. This is definitely not my wheelhouse at all, but I could totally see myself playing this game again. I don't think I'll be buying it because 2-player games rarely get played in my group anyway, especially 2-player abstracts, but this is a neat enough game that I think it's an option for me definitely when I'm over at Victory Point Cafe. I could definitely see myself giving this one a couple more tries over there, and who knows, maybe someday I'll decide to buy it just because it's a neat thing to have in my collection. It's definitely an elegant game that's a really cool combination of a bit of variety for a 2-player abstract. Alright, the second to last game that I'm going to cover, man, I'm talking about a lot of games right now, is Crazy Karts, which was also a review copy that was sent to me by Portal Games. And I've gotten a couple games of this played now, I believe a 6-player game and a 7-player game. And this is a zany team-based game where you are racing these little race cars down a straight-ish track that is made up of a bunch of hexagons. So you can't necessarily go straight, you're kind of always going a little bit right, a little bit left, dodging back and forth, trying to get to the end of the finish line. And the key to this game is that you are in a partnership with an opponent, or no, I'm sorry, with your partner, and each of you are going to be deciding what you're going to do on your turn, kind of programming your turn without communicating, and each of you control half of what you can do in this car. One person controls the acceleration, another person controls the brakes. One person has the steering, another person decides what initiative order you're going to be in, like are you going to go sooner in the round or later in the round. One person repairs your car, another person operates a gun that lets you shoot at other cars and potentially damage them. And so the fun of the game is, as you're programming, you're doing this all kind of real-time simultaneously, and once a team is done, then they start counting down from 5, and once they hit 0, everybody has to stop, so you can be a bit frantic. You all reveal your screens, and then several people usually groan because their opponent their partner did something that they were really not expecting. Like, oh, why did you speed up? We were going the perfect speed, or oh, you forgot to turn. You know, that kind of stuff, which is where the crazy in Crazy Karts comes from. Like, it wouldn't be that fun if you were always doing the right perfect thing and just squirreling your way through the course. It's all about all sorts of zany things happening. You run into a wall now because your partner just didn't put enough energy down into turning, so you kind of spin out. And it's a neat little game. It's got a whole bunch of stuff going on. You have a qualifying race, and then you do a final race, and there are items that you can get, and there's tons of power-ups, and it does feel like it might be a bit bloated. Like maybe there are some ways that you could streamline this game down, make it a little bit shorter, and still get the same amount of fun without all the excess stuff that's kind of stuck onto it. But I have enjoyed it. I've had a good time, and I did play an odd-numbered game, which is interesting, where the odd man out, in me in this case, plays the lone wolf, and they just play a much less effective car because you don't have that lack of communication with an opponent, with a partner. Oh my goodness, why these opponents? And it worked pretty well being the lone wolf, but it did not have the craziness that you have when interacting with your partner. So I've enjoyed this game. I think that there is a good game in there, and it's very likely that future plays of this will be somewhat significantly house ruled by me to like just have maybe one race, maybe remove the items and just streamline things down to just get to the core of the crazy racing without all the kind of glut that comes in this box. There's just a ton of cardboard in the box for this game. And finally, the 12th game I'm talking about is Signorie, which is a pretty medium to heavy Euro game that uses the dice pool drafting mechanic. Definitely the heaviest game that I've played that has this mechanism where you roll a certain number of dice and then players will take these dice out of a pool, essentially limiting the options that the other opponents have around the table to grab the dice from that pool. And this game has some pretty interesting things going for it. It's definitely a dry Euro theme and look to the game. You're just trying to send your sons off to war and get points for that, and marry off your daughters and get points for that. You have set collection where you're trying to get certain seals from other families in the Italy region, and you get lots of points for matching specific seals to your player mat. There's a different set that each person is going for, but the key to this game is that High value dice and low value dice are both good. Low value dice will keep you under a threshold of 13. At the end of the round, if you have more pips on the dice in front of you than 13, then you don't get a bonus action, and these bonus actions are really good. But high value dice are going to be cheaper to play because of a discounting mechanism in the game, but also they will oftentimes get you really good rewards based off of how you upgrade this player tableau you have in front of you, because you're trying to get points through marrying off your daughters and sending your sons away, but you could also, instead of doing those things, spend money and hire helpers so that when you do that specific action in future rounds of the game, you get a free bonus action for it. Like maybe your initiative goes up, or you get to send a son away for free, like, you know, an action that you didn't have to develop on future turns because you spent the time to do it now in front of you. Now, I played this game a couple times, and it's definitely heavier than I was expecting, and it is a long game. I haven't played the 4-player game, and I don't think I will, because even a 3-player game went way over 2 hours. I think it was like 2 hours and 40 minutes in our 3-player game, because there's so much to think about. Do you want that high value number because you can discount it, or do you want the low number, and then you need to do math, like keep doing math, like am I going to be able to stay under 13 in this round? Well, if I do this and I do that, and oh my gosh, there's so many branching options from a game where all you do on your turn is just take a single die. It seems quite simple, but in reality, there's just a ton of stuff going on, and honestly, I'm not sure if I'm going to be playing this game too many more times in general, because it was an interesting experience, but it was not necessarily the funnest experience ever. I'm hoping to do a in-depth review of this at some point in the near future where I can expound a little bit more on the nitty-gritty on this. It's definitely a neat game, but there's also some weird things where the game came with 3 official variants, but a couple of them seems like they should just be standard. Like, was the game tested enough? I'm not really sure. It's definitely not a bad game, but it's not really impressing me at this point. It's now time for On and Off the Shelf, where I show you the games that I've acquired since the last one of these vlogs, and the games that have left my collection so that I can have room for all these new games. And as you can see, I have picked up a bunch of games, and this happens, well, first of all, it's been 2 months since I've done one of these videos, so it's a larger amount of time than normal. But also, I found that when I work a whole bunch, I tend to buy more games. You know, it's like 3 or 4 in the morning, I just got back from a 19-hour day at work, and I decided, you know what? I'm going to buy $100 worth of games right now because I deserve it. I just worked really hard today, and click, 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 and there it is. It's coming over from Germany, and I'll have it, you know, in a week or so. So there is a high correlation of getting lots of games when I'm not actually playing as many games, although, as you can see from that last section, I've definitely managed to squeeze in a bunch of gameplays. So the Endgame board game auction happened about a month and a half ago, and this is a live auction at Endgame, which is a FLGS in Oakland, California. And for the first time in a bunch of years, I couldn't even go. There was a huge event at the San Francisco MoMA that day, and I love going to this live board gaming auction. It's just exciting, and you're seeing people bid, and oh, you know, oh my gosh, that game is there, oh, it's such a steal, and you really love being a part of that little community there, but I wasn't able to get it off. But I sold 35 games and made like $540 in store credit, which is great because that's allowed me to buy a bunch of new games from Endgame to keep adding things into the collection. Now, there are 2 games that are leaving my collection as of after the Endgame auction because I just don't have room, and that's kind of a restriction that I have for my collection. You know, this is a somewhat large game shelf, and I need to be able to keep my games on the shelf for the current timing. And if I don't have room for a new game to put on my shelf, I need to find a game that I'm going to get rid of, and I'm going to put it in a pile and put it up on the internet to potentially get rid of, or at the end of the day, and next year in March or April, it's going to go into the next Endgame auction, which is part of the reason why I sold 35 games. And so the 2 games for this set are Imperial Settlers and New York 1901. Now, Imperial Settlers is pretty easy to say. I had some issues with it, and 51st State is just better for me. I really enjoy 51st State, and I personally don't see a solid reason to keep both of these in my collection, especially considering I had issues with Imperial Settlers. I felt like it went on too long, and it was just a little bit too prone to making crazy, swingy engines that just made downtime and analysis paralysis a bit of an issue. And then as far as New York 1901 is concerned, this is a neat game. I reviewed it last year, but it didn't have enough to really keep me coming back to it. Like, I don't think I've played it since my review of last year because, well, I get a large influx of new games through review copies or just going out and buying them. And, well, I need space on my shelf, and so I don't think I see this one being asked for by anybody anytime soon, and so it's going to have to go into the pile that will go away. But as you can see, I have a whole bunch of new games coming in. Many of the games on this list I've already talked about in this video, which is great. I've really been trying to go out of my way to play the new games that I'm getting so they don't just sit on my shelf unplayed and staring back at me longingly whenever I happen to be laying on the couch exhausted after a long day of work and thinking, why can't I get that game played? So I'm getting most of them played, and I'm just really excited about it. I'm curious to see what next month's vlog will look like. Hopefully it's a much smaller list of game purchases, because honestly, it's starting to get hard to take games out of my collection. As the years go by, I'm doing this. My collection is getting better and better kind of on average, because I'm pulling out the games I'm less interested in and leaving other games on the shelf longer and longer. At some point, it's not going to work. At some point, I'm not going to be able to pull a game off the shelf, and at that position, I'm gonna have to come up with a new way to store my games. I don't know. Hopefully that's ways off in the future, but for now, yeah, this is the on and off the shelf bit, and that pretty much sums up this vlog. I've talked a bunch about a whole bunch of games. Hopefully I can get back on a regular schedule as work dies down a little bit to more manageable levels, because wow, I've talked about 12 plus games in this video, and that takes a while. I'd rather kind of break it down into smaller chunks. So I really hope you've enjoyed this video. Again, if you have any questions you'd like me to answer in future question and answer sections, you can send those over to me at JonGetsGames@gmail.com. And if you'd like to see more vlogs like this one, as well as in-depth board game reviews and fully edited playthroughs of board games, please subscribe to my channel. Also, you can directly support the channel at patreon.com/JonGetsGames. Thanks for watching.